Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Michael Regina. I am the author and illustrator of the all-ages horror graphic novel, The Sleepover, and I'm back here with another video to talk more about my creative process. And I wanted to actually try something that was a little bit of a different take on these sort of Deepwater Creek update videos that I've been doing because I'm really enjoying chronicling the process of making this graphic novel, but I also want to think about maybe there's a different way to approach discussing what I'm doing into maybe content that's more broadly applicable to you all than just thinking about it from the terms of, this is me telling you what I've been up to lately. I'll actually share some of the creative struggles or things I've been dealing with in the process, and then try to actually formulate a video in talking about how I've worked through that problem or worked through that situation. So today's video is a Deepwater Creek update, an update of my next graphic novel, but specifically what I want to talk about is getting past writer's block or moving forward with a story that you feel stuck on. As I'm sure many of you have experienced, one of the very difficult parts of writing a story is that it can be very easy to get sort of stuck within the story or feel like, man, maybe this story isn't good enough or people are going to dislike it or whatever the case might be. And that can be a big mental hurdle to get over. And one of the things I've had the hardest time with in working on Deepwater Creek is sort of some self-reservations I've had about the story itself, concerns I've had about the direction of it or the plot or the themes and so on. I'm really looking forward to sharing the solo role-playing game process with you all so you can see how I'm currently working on developing stories. But I developed Deepwater Creek long before I was playing role-playing games and before I even started the solo role-playing process. And so it's been a weird process in making this book where by the time I've sort of really developed a new way of approaching stories, I had already laid so much of a framework with this one that most of my mentality is sort of bring this book to its close and bring it to a conclusion before I really change too much of my process. But there's also like a lot going on within Deepwater Creek that has made it difficult to land on a final draft of the book. And unfortunately, we're at the time where I really need to turn in a final draft of the story so that I can then turn my attention over to the artwork and have the artwork delivered on time early next year so that we're on track with its release date. And I felt a lot of pressure or concern with, is this book going to be well received? Have I gone too far with its weirdness? Is everything working okay? I don't know what it is about that. My agent has actually said that from her observation, it is often the case that the second book for any of her authors has been the most difficult for them. I think a lot of it comes down to that you have a lot of, I think kind of perceived pressure in the process. When you were working on the first book that you had, there was a level of like no stakes involved other than just, will I get a book deal or something like that. But there's really nobody paying overly a lot of attention to you at that stage of the game. And with this one, not that The Sleepover was some gigantic hit or anything. It's certainly finding its audience, which is super exciting. But I think there's this feeling of like, can I capture something I was as happy with in this one as I was in the previous? And so I've gotten to the place where I spend a lot of time feeling stuck because I'm just reevaluating decisions. And very recently, I've had to really come to terms with a few things and realize that most of the hangups are probably my own and have little to do with the story. So I want to talk about a few things I've been using to work through this mentally, and maybe it'll be helpful to you if you're feeling stuck with a book or you feel or you're unable to kind of press forward, or you get in this rut where you kind of rework things and you don't move forward. So thought this might be helpful. Here's some tips on how to make decisions and move forward with your book and get rid of like that writer's block feeling. So like I said, one of the biggest things I've struggled with is this feeling of, are other people going to get what I'm making? Are other people going to enjoy this? And so this kind of first thing I want to talk about is making sure at the end of the day, I'm the person that's most happy with the book more than anything. So one of the things we do is if we're creating something that we then want to share with somebody, we become very concerned with like, is this book going to resonate with folks? Is this book going to be enjoyable to them? And that's actually the problem. It's not a bad thing to think about that, but the problem with it is that that is such a moving target, right? And something you think works may not work at all for people. And something you thought worked great might be completely lost on people. There is a certain way you can gain some of this. Obviously, if you share the book with people and you get common feedback threads and people tell you, hey, this thing isn't working for me, that probably is something worth addressing. There's a great quote, though, from Neil Gaiman that I wanted to point out here. And I'm just going to read it back. I'll put it up on the screen. But Neil Gaiman says to remember, when people tell you something is wrong or doesn't work for them, they are almost always right. When they tell you exactly what they think is wrong and how to fix it, they are almost always wrong. And so I've had to learn that when I give my books to people and they give me this constructive feedback and let me know what was and what wasn't working for them, really what I need to do is say, okay, I'm probably just not doing a good job of explaining that thing, so I'm going to focus on it. And get it fixed. But what I need to not do is take what he said, where they give you specific feedback and say you should do this, or, like in the case of Deepwater Creek, there's a version of this story that is probably a lot more simplistic and a lot more like the way Jaws is or something, where it's a very straightforward sort of monster story. But what I wanted to do was I got really inspired by something that felt like Nope, the movie Nope. I was really inspired when I saw Nope in the movie theater. It felt to me like it was a fun, high energy movie with some really big ideas, and some of them are pretty weird. And I was like, you know what? I want to make something that feels really fun and exciting, but has some big ideas in it, and will hopefully be an enjoyable ride and have a lot of layers to it that people would deal with. So I've gotten feedback in the past where people have said, well, what if it was more simple, or what if it was more straightforward? And like, yeah, there's a version of the story I could do that's that. But at this stage with the story, that's not the story I think I would be happy in telling. I want to tell something that has some deeper meaning to it, and finding this balance is a balance I'm going to have to work really hard to figure out. But what I'm doing a lot of is just saying, hey, I know maybe I could put these pieces together in a different way, but the bigger question is, am I happy with this story? Do I really like it? And if I like it, as an audience member, if it's fulfilling this thing of like, if I was watching this or reading this, I would really enjoy it, then, make that decision and move forward. I've also was really inspired by a quote from M. Night Shyamalan where he was talking about making the movie The Visit. And he talks about this idea of making a puzzle with his daughter. He said he came home from trying to sell The Visit to Hollywood, and basically no one wanted to buy the movie in its current form. And he came home and he was building a puzzle with his daughter, and he was like, man, something's not working. Something's not working. And his daughter said, hey, would you sit down and build a puzzle with me? While they were building the puzzle together, he said, man, this is so hard. We're building a 1,000-piece puzzle. And he said finding these first pieces was really difficult, but when he found one piece, he soon found another piece, and slowly but surely, the picture that was on the box of the puzzle began to become reality, and he started to realize, wait a minute, I can do this because I know there's a picture here. There's a version of this that's right, that's accurate. And he said he took that feedback and went back to the editing room, and he began focusing on making each scene just a little bit better than it was and trying to improve that part of the story. And I thought this was really cool because it means that as much as I need to think broadly, often fixing things can happen on a very small level by taking individual looks at scenes and tweaking and enhancing those scenes. So I've tried to do this a lot where I will maybe take a big pass, but then at some point I'll sit down or read through the story and just say, I got to finish this scene. What is it that's not working? Let me make a few tweaks and move forward. So that would be, I think, the next thing. It's just like focus one scene at a time, make it a little bit better with each time you sit down to work at it, and eventually there will be a picture there, a really beautiful picture. I'll put a link in the description below where M. Night talks about this sort of realization that he had on a podcast with J.J. Redick. It was a super great podcast. I highly recommend listening to it. And that point, I think, was a fantastic one. And, I actually love The Visit. I think The Visit was a great film. And I think lastly, what I'll mention is the need to understand that it's better to move forward than to stay stagnant, right? There is always going to be probably a better version of the thing that you're working on than the one you're making. I mean, there's moments in the sleepover that I look at now and I realized how I could have done that scene better after the book had already been turned over into the printer, and I'm like, I kick myself. I would have addressed the story in that way that would have made that scene that felt so clunky, so weird to me, feel better. So there's always going to be scenes. There's always going to be parts of the story that you look at and think, man, did I get that part right? There is no such thing as a perfect story or a perfectly executed thing. All you can really do is try to put the pieces together as best as you can, and then press forward, share it with people, let them provide that feedback to you on whether things don't make sense or they work for them. Be humble and listen to that feedback. But like Neil Gaiman said, to remember that they're right when they tell you something doesn't work, but don't necessarily feel like you got to listen to the specifics of how to fix it, because at the end of the day, it's your story. You're the person that needs to be most happy with it, because that's what keeps you energized and moving forward. At the end of the day, if someone says to me, the mythology of this story doesn't make sense, what if you blah, 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 I have to stop at the mythology of this story doesn't make sense. And I have to say, okay, something about this doesn't make sense. I can listen to their feedback, but don't, their specific feedback, but don't feel like I got to take it. So, but I have to then eventually make some decisions, decide that this is the route this story is going, this is the way it was intended, make those decisions and move forward. So that's been a lot of what like the last few months have been for Deepwater Creek. I've not really done a lot of videos on it because I've spent the last 3 to 4 months trying to finalize the story, doing thumbnails and this sort of thing, finishing out the last few scenes of the book and making sure they're great. So the challenge in working on this book has been, over the last few months, making final decisions on this book and arriving at a conclusion and saying, I'm really happy with this. And this past week, the big sort of update is I turned in a full draft of the book that I feel pretty good with overall. There's a few tweaks and pieces, but I'm getting more now into that phase of what M. Night talks about, of like just focusing on individual scenes and saying like, is there something I can do with this individual scene that will improve it, will make it a little bit better, make it clearer, or heighten the drama or the action? And one of the cool things I'm discovering is that I can do a lot of this just through the word balloons rather than having to redo the art. I often think like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to rewrite everything or redraw everything. But discovering that's not necessarily the case. And it's also easy to, if I want to make a new page, pick up panels, move them around. When you're thinking about a book in the broad sense like this, when you're thinking beginning, middle, and end, it's a lot easier to then say, look at the end of the book and see that, hey, I need to tweak this scene, I need to get that scene right, and be able to kind of move and maneuver pieces around. So, but I feel pretty good about the book. There's a lot of notes that I'm still incorporating. I believe that it's going to really I'm now moving mentally over into focusing a lot on finishing the art. So that's great. Like it's a big kind of mental cognitive load off of me to then just be focused on get the art done, finalize that, and then I can start working on my next book. And that I'm really, as I'm working on the next thing, I really am going to lean into this idea of doing a, kind of using solo role play to figure out and outline my books, because I'm just having a blast doing it. It makes a ton of sense, and it gets me out of this sort of like over-analytical state that I can often get in. So I'm kind of interested to see how I feel about my next project using this process versus kind of how I've approached things in the past. So more to share on that. Coming up very soon will be my series on writing with Solo RPG. I've recorded the first session. I've recorded the intro video. I need to do a couple more things, and then I will launch it. Like I said, I really wanted to try to finish the whole series before I put it out there for you all, so that you're not waiting for long time periods in between updates before you kind of got the next bit of it. I also put a poll out on my community page where I asked kind of how y'all wanted me to approach that, whether you wanted me to focus on an individual or kind of just getting a gist of like how this whole process works, as opposed to me outlining the whole story. And what I've kind of arrived on is that for the purposes of showing how to use this process to create an outline, I'm only going to kind of do one session with the book and do an outline for it, share a sample of what that might look like. But then what I'm thinking we're going to do probably is just play out the rest of the story as a solo RPG on the channel. We'll see. But more to come on that soon. Hopefully you'll see the solo RPG series in the next few weeks. So it's getting close. So anyway, I hope this was helpful for those of you who struggle with writer's block. I know I do. I don't know if I call it writer's block. I get in my own head a lot, and I start asking whether or not I'm making the right decisions. I don't think that's unique to anyone, and there is a part of it that means that you're probably making a better story because you're really working through it, and you're not just settling for what you think is best, but you're trying to make it the best. But there can be a stage where it's like, hey, you got to make some decisions and move forward. So hopefully this was helpful for you all. Appreciate you being here. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe, and join my mailing list, and you'll get a link to all of my exclusive email content. And I'll see you all next time. Take care.